What's going on, Steelers Nation? It's time to preview Steelers Giants on Monday Night Football. Pittsburgh Steelers 5-2, New York Giants 2-5. As always, just going over the injury report, key matchups, things to watch for, statistics, all that good stuff. Just before we get started, please make sure that you like the video, subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to drop me those game predictions in the comments. I always enjoy going back and reading all of those and interacting with the ones that I can, as many as I can get to. I'm excited to talk about this game. The matchup itself probably isn't going to be one that I think a lot of non-Steelers or Giants fans are too excited about, but primetime football, back-to-back weeks, Steelers have a chance to get yet another win right before they head into the bye week. I'm excited about this one for multiple reasons, but mainly because I'm actually going to the game on Monday night. So hopefully this one turns out better than the Colts game did that I went to a couple weeks ago. But I'm really looking forward to this just because my daughter, who is 4, this will be her first ever Steelers game. So she's really excited. She's got all her Steelers gear picked out and ready to go. So by the time, Monday morning rolls around, I should be in Pittsburgh. I'm really excited about that. First time being up there in a couple years. So let's jump right into this thing. Look at the injury report. I think from a Steelers perspective, not anything overly surprising that stands out here. Roman Wilson out with the hamstring. I think that there is a decent chance that he could potentially be going on an IR just with that re-aggravation. But we'll see what happens with that. The biggest loss here, honestly, is Nick Herbig and Zach Frazier. Frazier in particular, it sounds like they may be able to get him back after the bye week, which would be huge considering how well he's played. That's going to mean Ryan McCollum's going to have to step in at center. We're going to talk at length about his matchup with Dexter Lawrence, some of the things that Lawrence brings to the table, how they need to mitigate that matchup as much as they can. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be probably a couple weeks. Hopefully they can get him back after the bye. Nick Herbig out, but they did get Alex Highsmith back last week. I actually wrote about Alex Highsmith for SteelersNow.com. I thought he had a pretty good game last week. I thought that he was going to be able to get home a couple times. Unfortunately, a lot of his best wins or best reps came when Aaron Rodgers got the ball out quickly, but he did have 3 really high quality reps, nice pressures that resulted in incompletions. It's nice to see Smitty back on the field, especially with the amount of attention that TJ Watt is drawing on the other side of that one. From a New York Giants perspective, they are down a couple of cornerbacks. Cordell Flott is a guy that they've rotated in and out. He looks like he's going to be doubtful. Doubt that he plays. One of their backups, Trey Hawkins, is questionable. They were rotating in some different guys against Philly last week in their blowout loss to them. Other big news, Jermaine Illuminor, their starting right tackle, who's kind of helped provide a lot of stability on that right side. Steelers fans, you guys are probably familiar with Illuminor. We've talked about him on the channel before. He played in Vegas the last several years. He's just kind of like your baseline starter right tackle. He's just really reliable. But he's listed as questionable. He didn't practice Friday or Saturday, which would typically be a sign that he probably isn't going to play. But he tweeted out yesterday and has said in multiple different forums that he is going to play. So that's going to be TJ Watt's matchup this week. Of course, Watt still has the advantage. He had a good game last year when he matched up with Illuminor, even though he came in on a really hot streak into that one as well. But from a Giants perspective, not too anything, to make note of. Both Lawrence and Brian Burns, who missed some time in practice this week, they're both good to go. So that's going to be good news for the Giants. Kind of want to start off just by talking a little bit about the Giants defense, because I think that this is probably the more intriguing matchup. The Giants offense is a weakness, but I think that the Giants defense can give you some issues. I would say that they're probably best described as an average, slightly below average, but feisty unit. You look at the metrics, they're 21st in EPA per play, 21st in success rate. But really where they kind of make their living is they get after the passer really well. This is a team with a lot of different pass rushers, even without Kayvon Thibodeau, who is out for the foreseeable future, with an injury. You just look at some of the numbers. The Giants are 8th in quarterback pressure percentage, according to Next Gen Stats. You look at their sack percentage rate. They're 12.6%. That leads the NFL. They lead the NFL in total sacks at 31. They got a lot of contributions from a lot of different places. Really, I think the conversation really has to start with Dexter Lawrence. We talked about him a little bit already, but If I had to vote right now, and of course, we got a long way to go through the 2024 season, I think Lawrence would be my defensive player of the year. I think he's been absolutely incredible. You just look at some of the things that he does individually for them. You just don't see um, nose tackles like true zero techs impact the game the way that Lawrence does on a weekly basis. He's absolutely phenomenal run defender, but he's also an equally good pass rusher. You just look at I mean, I don't know that I've ever seen a nose tackle lead the NFL in sacks. He's got 9 sacks already this season, 26 quarterback pressures. I mean, some of the reps that he puts on tape are just silly. The dude has incredibly long arms. He loves this like forklift slash bull rush technique. You leave this dude one on one, it's really, really tough, man. Like you have to get as many eyes on him as you possibly can. He's a guy who will play passing downs, impact the game, push the pocket. And then as a run defender, he can take on doubles. He's really good at the point of attack, taking back space at the line of scrimmage. Even I think common sense would tell you hey, we got to run away from this guy, try to get to the perimeter. This dude plays with a lot of hustle. He runs plays down, wide zone plays down from behind. Just a fantastic player. Overall, the Giants as a whole, their metrics don't necessarily stand out. They don't defend the run extremely well. Philly ran all over them last week, kind of took advantage of them. The Giants allow over 6 yards per carry against shotgun runs this year. That was something that I kind of started to peak up a little bit. It is a little bit skewed because of that Philly game last week, and Philly likes to operate out of the gun. Saquon Barkley went off, and that one didn't even play a lot of the fourth quarter. But you can kind of get after this team. They are playing Azeez Ojulari is playing kind of in Thibodeau's spot. Burns is playing mostly on the right side of the defense. Ojulari is playing on the left. Ojulari he's gotten several sacks since he's came in, and his name has kind of been thrown out there in terms of trade deadline interest for other teams. One thing about Ojulari though is I think that it's nice to see him playing well now that he's fully healthy, but he's still a little bit undersized and you can run at him. So some of the big runs that I feel that they've given up since Thibodeau's went out have kind of been in his direction where he's gotten easily pinned, hasn't set the edge well, missed a couple tackles. So look for that. Maybe the Steelers kind of look to exploit that a little bit as well. The other reason that the Giants are super high just in terms of pressure percentage, basically any stat that you want to look at in terms of getting to the passer is Brian Burns. They made the big acquisition, kind of tried to pair Burns with Kayvon Thibodeau. This is kind of the identity of what they wanted to build on defense. Burns is a really freaky athlete. He's a pure speed rusher. He's one of those guys that can quote unquote, run under a table at full speed, incredible bend, incredible get off. You just look at the way that he flies off the ball. Next Gen Stats also has a cool new stat that they put out that I actually really like. It's called quick pressures. Basically, are you getting to the quarterback in less than 3 seconds? Burns, 17 of those already this season. That's tied for second in the NFL with Danielle Hunter, Nick Bosa, some of those guys. Burns also has a really unique kind of move set. He will use a spin to the outside. Like I said, he loves the ghost move. He does some inside counter stuff, plays with a really hot motor. Not a huge speed to power guy, but definitely a test for Dan Moore. The biggest thing that the Steelers offense really needs to make sure they do a good job of this week, stay out of third and long. Stay out of third and obvious passing situations. You just look at some of the metrics. That's one of the areas that this Giants defense has really excelled in is on third down. They've only allowed conversions on 30% of third downs this season. That's third in the NFL. So even though the overall metrics don't necessarily stand out as being overly great, they are 9th in points per drive. So like I said, this is kind of an average-ish unit that are kind of anchored by some stars up front. But they do some really creative stuff on third down. They like to play a lot of man coverage. And they trust their corners out there on an island, which we can kind of talk a little bit about that. But they play man coverage at the 5th highest rate just on third down. They're about average at blitz rate, but they do a good job of making sure their guys get one-on-one. So they'll walk linebackers up, they'll drop those guys out. They like to rush 4, and they do some different things in terms of load fronts where they'll align 3 defensive linemen on one side and then kind of put Lawrence basically on a shade on the center. The center is typically your weakest player in pass protection. I think that could potentially be the case with Ryan McCollum this week as well. So they do a good job of getting him one-on-ones. Now, something that I would like to see the Steelers do is that can be really effective in terms of facing interior rushers. You can slide the protection towards Lawrence. it will open up some other things in terms of like if Burns is on the opposite side or what have you. When the back exits out of the backfield, you need to make sure that he exits through the A gap. And the reason why you want to do that is because like Lawrence is a power guy, so he does like to run straight through the chest of offensive linemen. But if he does get on one of the edges, you can kind of have the back almost chip him back and get him on track with the block. And I've seen some teams try to do that. Philly did it a little bit last week, but I mean, Lawrence had a couple sacks in that game as well. Like the dude's dominant. He's probably going to get his. You just don't want to like let him completely wreck the game. Kind of same thing with Burns. Like a lot of those quick pressures have a higher tendency in terms of turning into turnovers, forced fumbles. The Steelers have been doing an excellent job taking care of the football. Only I think one interception thrown on the season. Russ did a good job mitigating sacks last week, even though I want to see him get more comfortable just in terms of like how he's maneuvering in the pocket. I think some of that will hopefully come back once he kind of shakes the rust off. But the Steelers are going to have some opportunities in this one. You just look at the way that the Giants like to play defense. They use a light box on 68% of their plays. I think that number will come down just because of the amount of heavy personnel that the Steelers like to play. So they'll probably stack the box a little bit more than they have this season, but they do like to, roll guys down late, play with two high safeties, at least on early downs, and try to defend the run that way. But you can get after this team running the football. We saw it last week. They have had some good performances. Like they did a decent job against Cincinnati, held them to like 17 points earlier in the season. Granted, it was like week 2 or something like that. Had a pretty solid game against the Commanders, who are currently like the number 1 offense in the NFL right now. So there's some different things where you can kind of get after this team, though, is this team allows a lot of big plays on the field. You just look at throws over 20 air yards. The Giants this season so far, 13 completions, 375 yards, 3 touchdowns. Those 13 completions are second in the NFL only to Baltimore. So they've allowed a lot of plays down the field. They're asking their second year, first round corner, Deonte Banks, to follow opposing teams' best weapons. Pickens is going to have an advantage there. Not because I actually love Banks a lot coming out of the draft, but he was just called out for some effort concerns. To me, like you can see it on film, he looks kind of disinterested, kind of being on a losing team. Like, I don't know what the attitude issue there is, but Banks has had a lot of good plays this season in coverage to where he's in good position, but he's just not locating the football. That was something that was a little bit of a red flag for me coming out of Maryland, is like there would be plays where he would be in the in phase in the hip pocket of receivers, but didn't play the football very well. Why does that matter? Well, we just watched Russell Wilson chuck half a dozen 50-50 balls to George Pickens last week. Now, obviously, it's good that last week they were on the good end of those 50-50 balls, but Pickens is going to have the advantage in the ball in the air. And, of course, the Giants are already down some corners, some different things. I will say that their nickel corner, Drew Phillips, is playing some good ball. He made a really impressive play that kind of jumped off the tape last week against Philly. They were in a kind of a trips bunch set, and he shed a tight end's block and got into the backfield, tackled the receiver very quickly. He was good whenever Philly did have to throw the ball. They just didn't have to throw the ball very much last week, but he's a really nice player. Is having a good rookie season for them. So he's really good. Short area mover, comes downhill, plays the run, that type of stuff. They're starting some other young guys, Tyler Nubin in the secondary. But you can get after this defense a little bit as long as you can pass protect and stay ahead of the chains. Some of the best runs that I've seen from them have, like I said, been running towards Ojulari's area. You can try to, mitigate Lawrence's presence a little bit with some of the other stuff, but it's going to be hard. He's going to get his big matchup for Ryan McCollum. Just interested to see like how the Steelers build off their performance from last weekend. How comfortable does the rest look? Can they get some other guys involved? Continue to stay ahead of schedule, produce those explosive plays off play action. That was a huge strength of theirs last week. So I'm just curious on what it looks like. Kind of moving to the Giants offense. Just full transparency, man. Like, this is just one of my least favorite offenses to watch in the NFL. I don't like watching Daniel Jones play quarterback. It was really tough for me to get through like a couple games of film of his. They do have some interesting players just in terms of Jones, like some of the things that he does well. He is getting, like, they are doing some things intentionally in the quick game area to get the ball out of his hands a little bit quicker. 2.76 time to throw, pretty solid. Quick game underneath area. Passing is pretty solid. He's a really good athlete. He's effective on scrambles. They use him a little bit in the design run game. Of course, that always comes a little bit more into play, like when you get into the red zone and things like that, third down situations. But for a team like the Steelers, who plays a lot of zone coverage, I'm not really sure how much he's going to be able to scramble, just because Steelers have done a really good job against not allowing scrambles this year. They haven't really played a ton of like athletic quarterbacks like Jones. But it's just when you're doing all that spot drop cover three, it's kind of difficult. The other thing that I think just makes this matchup a terrible one for the Giants offensively is that Jones is just terrible under pressure. You just look at some of the metrics, like you can see it on film. He just panics at the first sign of pressure, doesn't navigate the pocket very well, doesn't throw well with guys in his face. He's been under pressure on 100 dropbacks this year. He's only completed 33 passes. He's averaging 4 yards per attempt, 4 turnover-worthy plays, 0 big-time throws. I mean, it's bottom of the league, guys, just in terms of like quarterbacks. The Giants' offensive line, like you just look at it, the Steelers are going to have the advantage at all 5 spots. Like you just look at nose tackle all the way out to edge, they got the advantage. The Giants' best player on offense is Andrew Thomas, who's like a superstar left tackle. He's phenomenal. Great player. One of my favorite draft prospects from years and years ago. Problem is, Thomas is hurt. So they're starting Josh Azudu, who's making, I think, his second career start at left tackle. He was a guard at North Carolina when I scouted him coming out of college. And things didn't go very well last week. He gave up 2 sacks like early in the game. The Giants fell behind. They had to start passing the ball a lot. The thing is, like, I think the Giants kind of want to be a rushing team. They want to kind of take a little bit off of Jones's plate. Kind of hard to do that against the Steelers because the Steelers are really good defending the run, man. Like they've been able to make teams one-dimensional pretty much all season long. You just look at like the metrics. The Steelers are 3rd in rushing EPA. They're 6th in rushing success rate. It's really difficult to run on them under center. It's going to make for some difficult times for Daniel Jones. And they are starting, I think, going to try to get the ball more to Tyrone Tracy, who's like a converted receiver turned running back. I've actually been pretty impressed with Tracy. He can do some cool things. He's a unique player with the ball in his hands. He's pretty dynamic, can make guys miss in space, really good hands. He's a former receiver, but screens, draws. I actually think he's been pretty good on gap run plays too. So he's created some explosives for them. But again, like any like zone, inside zone's okay. They're not running a lot of wide zone. I think it's just a vision thing for him. They're kind of waiting for him to catch up a little bit in that regard. But Giants offensive line just really, really struggles, man. The Steelers are I think that this could be like a breakout type of game. Philly's pass rush hasn't been very good at all this season. I think they registered like 8 sacks. Daniel Jones got benched in that game. Brian Daboll doesn't even sound like happy at all that he's the team's quarterback right now. He came out this week and I think said that Jones is going to be their quarterback moving forward. I think if things go poorly in this game for Jones and the Giants offense, and they lose, I think they may turn to Drew Lock at some point very soon. So the other cool part about this offense that I think is notable in terms of if you're looking for ways that this game could kind of go south for the Steelers, it's Malik Neighbors. He has been awesome. Every bit as advertised. I really love Neighbors as a prospect. I think he was a top 5 player for me coming out of LSU. They're really intentional about the ways that they try to get him the ball. It seems like whenever he's on the field, he's always on the front side of the progression. They're moving him around. He plays some backside X on like some 3x1s, some quads formations. I think that his best work has probably come as a Z, as a flanker. They use him a lot in motion. You already see the route running chops, the explosiveness. He's a really difficult dude to get on the ground after the catch. So they spam him with a lot of underneath targets on crossers, hitch routes and things like that. You have to make sure that you tackle this dude because he has a really, really impressive accelerator. He can get to top speed almost instantly. He's also shown the ability to like win the ball at the catch point. So very well-rounded. He has really good contact balance with the ball as well. Not really a ton of holes in his game. There was a rep that I tweeted out this morning. I was going through and just like looking at all his targets. That was really impressive to me. They're in the red zone and they motion him over and Jones is in the gun and he's running this route where he takes a little bit of an inside release and he's there. It's at the 5-yard line. He takes an inside release, gets the cornerback stacked. And before he even like breaks to the outside pylon, he already throws like the mailbox up, throws his hand up, like tells Jones like, hey, I'm going to be open. Just creates a ton of separation, and then Jones throws the ball like 10 feet over his head, and he sometimes somehow goes up, gets it, gets both feet in bounds. He's just a really impressive player. So he's the number one kind of target. They will move him on the slot. They play Wandale Robinson in there. Like when Wandale's in the game, they like to throw him a lot of choice routes underneath, a lot of, I call them like empty calories, because a lot of his catches this season have not actually been like good plays for the offense. It's a lot of catches on like 3rd and 8 where he's getting like 5 yards and stuff like that, and you're punting right after. But Wandale's a decent player too. Like he's a possession receiver who can do some different things in the under 10-yard mark. But I think Neighbors and Porter, that's going to be a heavyweight matchup. The only times that I've really seen Neighbors even lose reps or really struggle this season, Quinyon Mitchell got him a couple times just in terms of like jumping him a little bit, being really aggressive, physical with some two-hand jams. It's always really sketchy doing that at the NFL level. You can sometimes get away with it against rookies and guys like that that don't necessarily have the best plan of attack versus press. But you can be a little bit physical with Neighbors, kind of knock him off balance. Like I said, he is often early in the progression. So if you can kind of slow him up at the line of scrimmage, by the time Jones gets his eyes over there, if he's not necessarily into his break or where he's supposed to be in terms of his landmark, you can kind of get Jones to go other places. And when he goes other places, typically that's when the play breaks down, because Jones isn't a guy who necessarily excels the further along his progression that he kind of gets. So I think the Steelers in this one can definitely do some different things in terms of just getting after Jones. This team doesn't have a ton of weapons. I think Darius Slayton is a decent player. He's a frustrating one just because of the drops and like his catching technique. He can really run. So like that's another area. Maybe like he gets a 60-yard bomb or something like that. This is a dude with like legit sub 4.4 speed. The problem with Slayton's skill set, in comparison with Jones, is just like Daniel Jones doesn't throw a good deep ball. He's 5 for 22 this year on throws over 20 yards. Slayton's been open a lot that I've seen on film, just in terms of being able to get vertical, get guys stacked on his back, and they just don't have very good chemistry. And like the chemistry thing is kind of bizarre to me because they play together for I don't know how many years now, but they look like they've never stepped on the field together. I tweeted that out earlier this week, and it's honestly mind-boggling watching them try to play. But the Giants do some different things on offense to try to make the game easier on Jones. I don't think Brian Daboll's like lost his mind, like he doesn't know how to construct an NFL offense. I think he does. I just think he's really hamstrung by some of the different things that there's just not a lot that I feel like that you can do with Daniel Jones on this offensive line right now, to be honest with you. They get in empty a lot, so that's something that they like to do. They like to spread you out. That's also notable just because like Steelers gave up the most passing yards last year out of empty. They've been a little bit better this year. Some communication errors and some different things. Empty is a really good tool for quarterbacks just in terms of like keeping things simple. If you want to get the ball out of your hands quick, like I said, that's something they've kind of focused on with Jones, even though the results haven't been necessarily great. But I just think the Steelers are going to dominate this matchup in the trenches, man. Like at least on the defensive side of the ball, I look at the matchups and it's just really difficult to see them not being able to get Jones flustered into making some poor decisions, turnover-worthy plays. And I just don't have any faith that, or there's nothing to convince me that the Giants are going to be able to run the ball on the Steelers either. This does have like a little bit of a trap game feel to me, but I don't know. I just think that Monday Night Football in front of your home fans, against a team that you're very clearly better than, it does worry me a little bit just with like the bye week and stuff coming up and, the second half of the schedule and whatever. I'm not saying that this isn't a game that the Steelers could potentially lose. It just, to me, like you just look at it on paper, this is a game that they absolutely should win. And hopefully, you head into the bye 6-2. Hopefully they're able to, go out, get another receiving option for Russ, try to make a run at this thing towards the playoffs. If you're interested in like some receiver type discussion things, you can go to the members only section, sign up, become a channel member for exclusive access, additional perks, more film rooms, all that stuff. I did a really lengthy film room on Raiders wide receiver Jakobi Meyers, who's like, to me, he's like the number one trade deadline target that I'd like to see them go after. The Raiders are going to be in a fire sale mode. I just think that they would listen on pretty much everybody except Max Crosby, which the Steelers don't really need him. Be nice, but they don't really need him. But Myers is a guy who I explain everything in the film room, but he's a guy who I think is a perfect fit for like what they're missing, what they need in the offense. I think he'd be good for the quarterbacks, but I think they need to make a move too. But first things first, got to take care of business on Monday night. I really appreciate you guys watching, your continued support for the channel. Just as some housekeeping stuff, I don't know when the recap will be up, if I'm being fully transparent. I will try to maybe post something, but I am going to the game. Like I said, Monday night, I'm going to enjoy that. I will have some sort of recap ups at some point Monday. I don't know if it'll be Monday morning. I don't know if it'll be Monday night. I don't know if I'll do it live, whatever. But I will have a recap up of the game once I can get my thoughts out to you guys. But as always, I appreciate it. Just on your way out, please make sure that you like, subscribe, turn on notifications, drop me those score predictions, and I will holler at you guys in a couple days. Peace and love.